Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Tales of Herding Gods based on novel. So let's start. When the meteorological phenomenon changed drastically at the end of Founding Emperor era, sun ship and moon ship crafted by the gods of Founding Emperor period were used to drive away the darkness. It allowed things to grow, and the people were able to survive. However, the two types of ships were sharp weapons in battle as well. Sun Guardian of Sun Ship and Moon Guardian of Moon Ship could mobilize the energy of the majestic ship so that their own energy would reach the level of heavenly gods. They would gain the mighty force to change heaven and earth. Qin Mu had once used Sun Ship and also borrowed Moon Ship, so he knew the powerful and extraordinary points of the two ships. With secrets of dragon control from dragon-rearing scriptures to borrow the power of the divine Flood Dragon King and the Flood Dragons, he could open his divine bridge so his primordial spirit would reach the celestial heavens. However, he could only enter the southern heavenly gates and had no way to enter the depths of celestial heavens. In comparison, borrowing the power of Sun Ship or Moon Ship would allow him to reach Jade Pavilion, which stood beside Jade Lake. Yet Sun Ship and Moon Ship had their bane, and it was 10,000 spirit nature technique. Sun ships lent power to Sun Guardians and Moon ships lent power to Moon Guardians. That power came from the bodies of the two ships, not their wielders. The two ships possessed boundless terrifying energy, and with the sun or moon forged by gods as an energy source, they were able to drive away the darkness. 10,000 spirit nature technique had the ideology of all things having spirit and all things having soul. It relied on practitioners' sense of nature to create spirits, awakening all things in heaven and earth, and calling them to fight. A god who cultivated 10,000 spirit nature technique could wake the spirit in Sun Ship and Moon Ship to fight for them. In that case, what awaited Sun and Moon Guardians as well as the Sun Herders and Moon Herders would only be a bloody massacre and death. Even the Guardians themselves wouldn't be able to escape. Many years ago, there must have been a terrifying battle here. Sun ships and moon ships encountered a god that cultivated 10,000 spirit nature technique, which resulted in them being destroyed, one by one. Meanwhile Qin Mu looked to the west, and his gaze was like candlelight flickering in the wind. West Earth's true heaven palace must have some relation with this. He always felt that West Earth's true heaven palace was a sacred ground like Great Thunderclap Monastery and Tao Sect. But even though Palace Master had remarkable divine arts, she was merely a strong practitioner trapped in Divine Bridge realm. Her sacred ground was no different from the other sacred grounds. However, from the looks of it, West Earth's true heaven palace was probably hiding numerous secrets and even a terrifying existence. Not only that, just the name True Heaven Palace gave rise to some possible considerations. Heavenly Saint Cult got its name because of Woodcutter imparting his teachings being revered as a saint. Great Thunderclap Monastery was named that because of Mount Meru's height, its top being located at the layer of thunderclouds. When thunder and Buddha voice resonated together, it was so loud that even the deaf could hear. Tao Sect was famous because of Tao Sword and Kunlun Mountain, while Little Jade Capital was a fragment of Founding Emperor era's Jade Capital. The names of the sacred grounds revealed their origin in a way. So what was the origin of True Heaven Palace? Why did the god of True Heaven Palace destroy sun and moon ships? The ruin of the divine palace in the desert and the strange sand giants were probably the doing of that same god as well. The desert covered in strange flames which made flame markings appear on the abandoned people and attempted to burn them to death. Was it also related to True Heaven Palace? Why would flame markings appear on the abandoned people that stepped onto the land, though? Why would only the abandoned people of great ruins be burned to death while the others felt nothing when they touched the flames? How many secrets were hidden in West Earth? The flaming desert blazed furiously, feeling extremely scorching to Qin Mu. Suddenly, another ruin appeared in front of them, and before the dragon Qilin could close in, they saw violent gusts of sand gathering in there. A sand giant gradually took shape and another was also forming next to it. Violent sand was swirling all around their feet. The dragon Qilin was about to take a detour when Qin Mu said, "No need, continue on the way." The dragon Qilin could only rush toward the sand giants that were overflowing with murderous intent. Formation markings swirled in Qin Mu's eyes as he surveyed the ruin from afar. The sand giants rushed over and came closer and closer. Suddenly there was a sword hum as carefree sword swooshed along the desert floor. It raised a whirlwind which swept up the sand. The sand giants came to 100 miles away from the dragon Qin before suddenly collapsing. Rolling sand surged forth, and the dragon Qin immediately gave a loud roar, dispersing the crumbling dunes. Qin Mu called back carefree sword while the dragon Qin carried him into the ruin. There, he saw a god statue which was sliced into some 8 pieces lying around the shrine. The dragon Qin floated away. We should be able to enter West Earth by tomorrow afternoon. On a broken sun ship, Qin Mu lighted a bonfire and let the dragon Qin and Xiong rest. He could still endure, but the dragon Qin needed to rest after running for so long. It was also hard for Xiong to endure the journey at a young age. Qin Mu looked toward the west, and his gaze passed through the weird flames of the desert. In them, a figure appeared in the distance. Qin Mu smiled and waved his hand. It startled the figure, and it hurriedly escaped. Grandmaster's guts are becoming smaller and smaller. Qin Mu burst out laughing. Pan Gongso left the broken sun ship, his face was flickering between clear and dark. He had already reattached his broken arm, and the injuries he'd suffered were all basically healed. However, he still couldn't manage to sneak up on Qin Mu. It was not that he had never thought of sneak attacking or even facing off with Qin Mu, just that when he realized that his chances of victory weren't high, he could only banish the thoughts. He wanted to leave, but he suddenly saw sand flowing silently in the surroundings, and his heart couldn't help throbbing slightly. He hurriedly looked at the flames. The desert at night wasn't in complete darkness. The flames lighted it up, but by a lot. In the distance, Pan Gongso saw a strange human figure which looked like a wooden puppet walking over. Its joints warped as it walked in a strange manner. The flowing sand in the desert moved with the puppet's footsteps, and the strange thing was that the sand actually didn't make any sound. Pan Gongso's heart leaped into his throat when he saw the figure of another wooden puppet followed by the third and the fourth. When they got close, he realized that the strange figures were actually wooden god statues. But their eyes were actually real and not wood. At that moment, they were closing in on the sun ship silently. As Pan Gongso's heart throbbed, one of the wooden god statues turned to look at him, revealing a peculiar smile. It stretched out a wooden finger and placed it by its mouth to make a shush action. Pan Gongso blinked, but didn't move, watching the god statues moving toward the sun ship. The flowing sand surged, carrying the wooden sculptures into the air. The sand mass beneath them became larger and larger. Pan Gongso grew nervous, his hands forming into fists in a certain excitement. The surroundings of Sun Ship were already sealed off by sand giants. They raised their huge fists high up and prepared to smash down on the Sun Ship in which Qin Mu rested. That Qin brat is a goner! Pan Gongso was so excited he nearly began shouting in joy. At that moment, a silver sword light swooshed and pierced the head of a wooden god statue. It exploded and was then followed by a second, third, and fourth one. After the explosions, the arms of the sand giants froze in midair before crumbling like flowing sand, burying half of the sun ship. Fight with me! A sneer came from the ship. Pan Gongso no longer hesitated and turned to leave. There's no chance to succeed when scheming against this brat. However, why is an abandoned person like him coming to West Earth? Is he seeking death? The owner of these wooden god statue, I know her, we've met once, but it wasn't something I like to recall. Hee, Qin brat, even if I want to kill you, why would I need to make my move personally? He smiled. Then again, even if I didn't borrow her power, I still have a few old friends in West Earth, so killing you is simply too easy. Rascal, you dare to oppose me? After you die, I'll make your corpse grovel before me. The next afternoon, the dragon Qin finally walked out of the desert and the flame markings gradually faded from Qin Mu's body. They came to the border town of West Earth where there were many men and women wearing embroidered headbands. Their clothes were gorgeous, full of gold and silver. Those with a higher status wore silver headdress that was sculpted as phoenixes and vermilion birds. The clothes on their bodies were usually red or black and looked dazzling to the eyes. There was an extremely high number of pretty girls while the men looked somewhat plain and simple. When the trio just entered the little town, Xiong-Chia whined about wanting to eat sour fish, chili bones, rice flour noodles, and drink bug-poop tea. She had left her hometown for more than half a year and couldn't hold back her excitement at the thought of being able to eat the delicacies of her hometown. She wanted to eat everything at once. West Earth used gold and silver to settle payment, so Qin Mu had brought some and let the girl eat to her content. Qin Mu also got a taste. The food of West Earth tended to be more spicy and sour, having a different taste. However, he didn't dare to try bug-poop tea. It was made from the feces of the bug which ate tea leaves, so even though the tea was unusually fragrant, he was still slightly terrified. Grandpa Apothecary likes to drink tea, so I should bring some for him to try, Qin Mu thought to himself. He then examined his surroundings. The architecture of West Earth was quite different from that of Eternal Peace. The local conditions and customs were all different, but the strangest things were the houses. They were constructed from wood and were circular. Many buildings had an inscribed board on which hung a god statue. After inquiring about it, Qin Mu learned that those god statues were used to prevent people from using spells to awaken spirits. Because the spells of West Earth took the path of all things having spirit and all things having soul, if a divine art practitioner executed a spell and a house suddenly stood up and ran away, wouldn't the whole family be left cold and hungry? Only if a god statue was worshipped in the house would it not be summoned away by divine art practitioners. Qin Mu blinked at such an explanation. The sight of a huge cluster of houses standing up to battle was truly something fresh. However, could the god statue really prevent the houses from being taken away by divine arts practitioners? There are also numerous shrines on the mountains used to suppress the mountain spirits. There's also a divine shrine in every river to prevent divine arts practitioners from taking them away. However, those mountains and rivers all have owners, an elder explained. Qin Mu looked around and clicked his tongue in wonder. When looking at the mountains stretching into the distance, he finally understood why the mountain range of West Earth hadn't yet been razed to the ground. The land still had verdant hills and limpid water, which was a pleasant scenery. Why do all the mountains and rivers here have owners? Qin Mu asked. Who are they? They, of course, belong to the masters of True Heaven Palace. There are also some that belong to divine arts practitioners of some place or some sect, the elder said. Not only do the mountains and rivers have owners, even flowers, grass, and trees all have owners. They can't be carelessly touched, otherwise, even selling oneself won't be enough to pay up. As he was saying that, the ground gently trembled, and the people around became flustered. They hurriedly dodged to the side, and Qin Mu looked toward the origin of the sound, where he saw a tree walking over. On it stood a woman who was holding a painted scroll. She shouted loudly, "An escapee from Great Ruins entered our West Earth today. True Heaven Palace has ordered to capture this fugitive. Come, hang this portrait up." The woman wore a black top and black skirt, while silver accessories adorned her head. There were also over a dozen silver bracelets with bells on her wrists. Her appearance was impressive, and soon a person walked over to take the portrait from her hands to hang it on the announcement board. The woman of True Heaven Palace looked down at them from high above and said, "This fugitive from Great Ruins is extremely important and will come from the Flaming Desert in the next few days, so you guys have to be alert. If you see him, don't make a commotion so he won't be alerted." Xiong-Chia wanted to run over to look, but Qin Mu grabbed her tiny hand to prevent her from getting lost. There was a large crowd in front of the announcement board, and it was impenetrable. However, Xiong-Chia still managed to squeeze all the way forward while pulling Qin Mu behind her. He then raised his head to see himself on the painting. On top of it were written, "Great Ruins Fugitive Qin Mu." Xiong-Chia was both surprised and delighted. "Fatty Dragon, you are also beside Big Brother. Only I'm missing, up.dated b.y readnovelfull.com. The surroundings had been full of noise moments ago, but everyone fell silent at that moment. They looked at Qin Mu. He seemed to not notice anything as he looked at the announcement board with a smile. "This is the work of Pan Gong So, he painted it personally. Xing'an also had a portrait of me which was drawn by him, so I can recognize his strokes." Whoosh! The surroundings instantly emptied as the crowd dispersed, moving as far away from him as possible. Qin Mu paid no mind to it and continued to smile. Grandmaster still has a wide circle of friends and knows quite a lot of people. It's a pity he ran too fast and I didn't manage to kill him. Great ruins fugitive, die! An angry shout came from behind him, followed by a whoosh as the tree man raised its gigantic feet to step on him. The tree man was incomparably heavy and its power was immense. Since there were a lot of trees and their prices weren't high, divine arts practitioners of West Earth would usually choose them as their main transportation and weapon in battle. The tree man that the female disciple of True Heaven Palace had chosen was of a different breed, though. Its branches, trunk, and leaves were crimson like blood, and based on its appearance, it seemed to have gone through numerous battles, gaining quite an awe-inspiring air about itself. Qin Mu stretched out his hand in a grabbing motion, and a ball of green light flew out from the tree man's body which froze it in place. Qin Mu had taken out the soul of the tree. Xiong Xiu had imparted 10,000 spirit nature technique to him, so even though he felt that it wasn't as easy for men to cultivate as to women, he had still put in quite some effort into it. The disciple of True Heaven Palace was astonished, and the silver accessories on her head suddenly flew up, transforming into a silver phoenix that rushed at Qin Mu. The silver bracelets on her arms also flew out to encase his head. Flames blazed around Qin Mu's body, and before the silver phoenix and silver bracelets could even reach him, they turned into a puddle of molten metal. The female disciple of True Heaven Palace saw that her situation was bad and immediately turned to leave. Her clothes fluttered and brought her to soar into the sky. She didn't even have to use any flying spells. 10,000 spirit nature technique is really miraculous, even the clothes can allow one to fly, Qin Mu exclaimed with admiration. Seems like I have still underestimated this technique. The woman grunted and fell from the sky. Big trouble. The crowd in the surroundings fled in all directions while shouting among themselves. A lowly man is going to kill a female master. Qin Mu looked around and saw that the street was already empty. The doors and windows of all the houses were shut, and there wasn't a soul in the surroundings. Only the dragon Chelin and Xiong Chia were still standing beside him, while the female disciple of True Heaven Palace was sprawled on the ground. The fall had stunned her. Do you know how to reach True Heaven Palace? Qin Mu asked with a friendly expression. That female disciple of True Heaven Palace suddenly flipped forward, and the hairpins in her head shot toward his eyes like swords. She quickly moved to a house beside the street and she raised her hand to pluck down the god statue on the inscribed board. Boom! The house suddenly stood up and transformed into a giant. The two small rooms became the fists which smashed down on Qin Mu. The hairpins froze in place when they got near Qin Mu's eyes. The formations in them swirled, and the hairpins melted into droplets of molten silver. Qin Mu raised his head, and the starlight shone in his eyes, sweeping toward the house giant. Through a window, he could see a family shivering inside and not daring to move. I knew these god statues had no use. Two beams of light shot out from his eyes and swept past the female disciple of True Heaven Palace. He said indifferently, as divine arts practitioners, you care nothing about these ordinary people. I despise you. The two beams became shorter and shorter, returning back into his eyes. The formations that were swirling crazily vanished and the stars gradually dimmed. The house giant landed down with a crash and transformed back into a circular house. Qin Mu turned to leave as the woman on the roof froze. She didn't dare to move. When Qin Mu picked Xiong Chia and jumped onto the dragon Chelin's back, the sound of the door opening came from below. The female disciple of True Heaven Palace revealed a look of terror and lowered her voice. Don't open the door. Creak. The door slowly opened more, and the woman screamed, don't open the door. Her vital chi couldn't stabilize her body anymore and bloodlines appeared on her neck and waist. Two chunks of flesh then slid off from her waist and tumbled down to the street. Her two legs fell off the roof afterward. Cult Master is really benevolent. Outside the small town, the dragon Chelin couldn't help exclaiming in admiration. That woman was so ruthless yet Cult Master. Just as he said that, he heard the screams of the woman behind him, so he turned back to look. He was just in time to see the sight of her lower body falling off. This made him unable to resist a shiver. Qin Mu sighed ruefully. I'm not benevolent. For divine arts practitioners to put their hands on ordinary people is already considered a taboo. We are all human, so how can we recklessly take the lives of others just because we're stronger? When I was in Eternal Peace Empire and Great Ruins, the battles between divine arts practitioners rarely involved the innocent. Even when I fought with Pangon So, we also fought outside the city. When Granny Sai fought with Border Dragon City Lord, she had also done so in the sky above the city instead of recklessly going at each other among the common folk in the streets. The Dragon Qin shut his mouth and didn't continue the conversation. He had originally planned on praising Qin Mu's benevolence for not taking the life of that female disciple of True Heaven Palace, but he hadn't expected she would still end up killed by him. The benevolence that Qin Mu mentioned was only targeted at the ordinary people. Ever since he was young, Qin Mu had been taught by the 9 elders of disabled elderly village, learning from their words and examples. Even though he carried the title of Heavenly Devil Cult Master, he could still clearly differentiate between right and wrong. Based on that point alone, he had surpassed many of the righteous people in most of the reputable sects. Chia should know the direction of True Heaven Palace, right? Qin Mu asked. Xiong Chia shook her head. My mother brought me out to avoid pursuit, so we walked through many desolate places and I don't remember the path back. Qin Mu muttered to himself irresolutely for a moment before saying, Fatty Dragon, let's head along the official road. We can ask for the way once we reach a big city. The people there should know the direction of True Heaven Palace. The Dragon Qin followed the official road and covered dozens of miles. Gradually, there were more and more people traveling on land. The road was very wide and flat, much better than in Eternal Peace. The river beside the road was also so clear that the bottom could be seen. There were fish, turtles, and snakes, and they were all not small. There was also divine arts practitioners and martial arts practitioners hurrying on their way over the water. The women were in the majority, but there was also quite some men. The technique that those people cultivated most likely also followed the path of all things having spirits and all things having soul. Some of the women and men would stop on the river's surface and call out to it. Waves would instantly rise up high, speeding them forward. There were also passers-by on the road, and many of them were hurrying on their way on tree men. There were also vine men, but their speed was slower. There were also divine arts practitioners riding all kinds of flying beasts in the sky. Their multicolored wings reflected light, making them very eye-catching. Seems like we are close to the city. Qin Mu let out a sigh after seeing the increasing number of people. Suddenly, clattering sounds rang out, and Qin Mu instantly saw a strange sight. Numerous maidens rushed out from a col and flipped many small mountains in a rush to the main road. What was carrying those maidens was a huge chest which was over 12 feet large. It took wide strides and ran very quickly. Some more girls rushed out from a village nearby, but what they were riding was a wooden boat. It had also grown feet and was running on land. Qin Mu was dumbfounded. It was as though the chest and wooden boat had turned into spirits, able to sprint like the Dragon Qin. It was truly weird. There's anything and everything in the boundless world, and the spells and divine arts of other places can also be used by Eternal Peace. If this kind of spell was promoted to Eternal Peace Empire, wouldn't that be wonderful? Qin Mu blinked and thought to himself, however, it would cause some confusion, wouldn't it? I reckon those with strong magic power would probably ride mountains to show off. The girls were very curious about the Dragon Qin he was riding, and the huge chest with over 12 legs came over. It was very big and numerous yards in length and width. There were also silk cushions that were like clouds laid out on the top. 7 girls sat on them as they examined the Dragon Qin and Qin Mu. The girl in the lead should have been their leader, and it was her who was using her magic power to control the chest, making it carry them forward. She looked very pretty when she smiled, and the huge eyes under the tassels weaved by silver pendants were like crescents. Her voice had a unique accent of West Earth, but before she even spoke, she already started giggling. Little Bubba, your big pig runs really fast. Where did you get it? Qin Mu was stunned for a moment, then came to realization that Little Bubba was probably little brother. He smiled and said, this is a Dragon Qin, a mixed breed between a dragon and a Qin. Chia popped out from the dragon Qin's fur and revealed her small head that looked around with curiosity. The girls were surprised and found the little girl to their liking, wanting to kiss and hug her. Qin Mu was helpless and could only let the dragon Qin move closer to them. He brought Chia up and sent her onto the chest. He started chatting with the girls and found out that the reason they were surprised was because he was bringing Chia along. West Earth social customs were different from what he was familiar with. After a man and a woman went through visiting marriage, if a child was born, the son would be sent to the man's house while the daughter would be kept by the woman. This social custom resulted in a strange situation in West Earth. The families were either all female or all male, and numerous villages were made up of solely men or women. When the girls saw Qin Mu bringing Chia, they thought she was his daughter. However, looking at how Qin Mu wasn't that old and looked like a sunshine bright boy, they changed their minds. He didn't look too young to have kids, so they couldn't help becoming astonished. "Little sisters, can I ask you girls about something?" Qin Mu was puzzled by the social customs there and probed. "I've met a girl once, and she invited me to her house, but she told me not to walk through the main door but flip through her window instead. What etiquette is this?" The girls all started to giggle, and the eyes of the girl in the lead curved into crescents again. "Perhaps little Bubba isn't silly. When a girl asks you to flip through the window, it means she wants to smooch with you, just like how the necks of the mandarin ducks coil together, rubbing against each other." Qin Mu scratched his head in puzzlement. "What mandarin duck coiling?" The girl in the lead jumped onto the dragon Qin's head and smiled. "Don't move." After she said that, she leaned into his chest and grabbed his hands to put on her chest. She moved her face over and her long neck went into his embrace. She rubbed her face against his, and her earlobes touched with his, giving him a smooth and intimate feeling that was indescribably soft and charming. Qin Mu's face flushed as he was left at a loss. All he could smell was the fragrance of the girl. She chuckled and returned back to her chest. The other girls looked at his intoxicated look and all laughed loudly in delight. "Big sister, was your heart moved? Why don't you take him for visiting marriage?" one girl even teased. She took a glance at Qin Mu, and her heart was pretty moved. She said hesitantly, "It's just if he is willing or not." The other girls also nudged her, and she took a fragrance pouch out, throwing it to Qin Mu with a giggle. "Little Bubba, you can climb through my window tonight. I'll teach you how the mandarin ducks do it." The women in West Earth were daring and much more fiery than the girls in Eternal Peace Capital. Qin Mu felt that he couldn't digest all that was happening and immediately changed the topic. "Do you know how to reach True Heaven Palace?" Even though the girls had cultivated some spells of West Earth and knew there was a place called True Heaven Palace, they didn't know its exact place. West Earth was vast, no smaller than Eternal Peace or Great Ruins. Most of the people living in the latter knew about Dao sect, but most of them also didn't know where it was located. The people of West Earth were the same. Qin Mu was slightly regretting killing that female disciple of True Heaven Palace. In front, a magnificent city appeared in his eyes, and the maidens said that they were there for the fair. The city was called Fragrant Bloom City and was full of fresh flowers blossoming. Green vines crept over the city walls, and huge blooms rested on the wall. The tower was also draped with fresh flowers that bloomed in beautiful purples and brilliant reds. They were very eye-catching. Upon coming closer, Qin Mu saw that those flowers were spirit-like, since beautiful maidens came out from within them. They gently sang folk songs that he didn't understand after having been awakened by spells of the people in the city. They adorned the scenery of Fragrant Bloom City. There were Sindapsa's maidens wearing green dresses, and begonia maidens carrying brilliant red flowers among the tall buildings. Dated by BoxNovel.com. There were also giants formed by rocks knocking on drums and unknown flowers floating in the sky. Their spirits played flutes and peepers as they accompanied the giants. Qin Mu felt like a country bumpkin. Humongous objects were walking on the streets, and they were houses which had grown feet. Boys and girls stood at the windows, looking around and giggling loud and clear. There were also streamers fluttering in the wind, flying out from one window to another, forming bridges. Girls wearing all kinds of splendid clothes stepped on the streamers to cross the distance and meet their loved ones. It's Flowery Mountain Festival, Xiong Chia said excitedly. My mother brought me to play here before. True Heaven Palace's Flowery Mountain Festival is even more bustling than this. Qin Mu parted ways with the maidens on the chest. The dragon Qilin carried them down the magnificent street. The flourishing sight of West Earth was unimaginable. It was worlds apart from eternal peace, but it also had an unusual appeal. They walked through the city, which was filled with numerous girls throwing fragrance pouches at Qin Mu. There was even a daring one who stepped on a streamer and came over to pull his hand to rendezvous in the building giant. Qin Mu let go of the girl's hand, and she was like a fairy when she floated back into the building, going off to look for other handsome men. The disciple of True Heaven Palace he had met in West Earth was extremely fierce, and he didn't have a good impression of the woman of West Earth, but after coming to Fragrant Bloom City, he was attracted by the local conditions and customs. Flowery Mountain Festival that happened once every year was extraordinary bustling. Qin Mu passed through the crowd, building giants and house giants until he finally reached the center of the city. It was much quieter and less lively. One of the people living here should be the landlord of Fragrant Bloom City. I should be able to get news of True Heaven Palace from him or other important personas. At that moment, a green vine grew rapidly and floated to Qin Mu's face. There was a huge flower on the tip of the vine which suddenly bloomed. A girl in pink popped out from the flower and smiled sweetly. Are you young Master Qin? Qin Mu nodded. That woman walked out of the flower, but there was a stamen connected to her back. She smiled. Young Master, my owner has an invitation for you. Please follow me. There's someone here who knows me. Astonished, Qin Mu climbed down from the dragon Qilin's back. Lady, please lead the way. The woman also landed on the ground and led them to a huge house that was like a manor, looking pretty imposing in style. The two stone lions stood up and turned around to look at Qin Mu and the dragon Qilin before squatting back down on the stone platform. Qin Mu followed the lady in the flower into the house and saw numerous young men and women coming to and fro. It was very bustling, but they were mostly people changed from flowers, grass, trees, and jade. There were even some that were of black gold and black copper. This manor isn't in the style of West Earth, but that of eternal peace. Wait a moment, these black gold and black copper. Qin Mu was slightly stunned when his gaze fell on a walking cauldron with food inside. It jumped onto the head of a man of fire to cook the food inside itself. This huge cauldron is a spirit weapon. Even spirit weapon can transform into spirit? Qin Mu suddenly felt like everything had become clear. He couldn't help slowing down and entering into a daze. He could sense another shortcut for the reform. It was bringing the ideology of all things having spirits and all things having souls into eternal peace, which would raise another wave of reform. If the spirit weapons of eternal peace's divine arts practitioners could gain spirit, everyone's ability could be raised tremendously. Not only that, with the merge of the two kinds of systems, more spells and divine arts could be created and could become even more versatile. The spirit weapons of the divine arts practitioners of Eternal Peace Empire weren't truly spirit weapons, for they were merely born and nurtured in the divine treasure. But if they absorbed the ideology of West Earth, they could become spirit weapons in the truest sense. The spells of Eternal Peace place importance on attack power, and there are all kinds of strange techniques and miraculous skills. The spells of West Earth are inferior in attack power and they also lack offensive methods. However, the method of all things having spirit could allow spirit weapons to become true spirit weapons. With two kinds of systems, we could complement each other. The most difficult problem was only how to merge the spells of all things having spirit from West Earth with the techniques of Eternal Peace Empire, allowing the divine arts practitioners of Eternal Peace Empire to sense the spirits and awaken them inside the spirit weapons. It's a man. Qin Mu was puzzled. Fragrant Bloom City was obviously an extremely flourishing city, so by right, it should have been a woman who was in charge of the household. Why was there then a situation in which a man was situated at a high position? He looked once more at a handsome young man welcoming him. The youth gave him a familiar feeling, and he felt like he'd seen him somewhere before, even if he was sure he had never met him before. This video will end here.